pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roll with planet. Flight is outside of speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
All right, folks. Let me know if you can hear us, and really quickly, we should be getting the camera really quickly. There it is. All right. Let me know if you can hear us, and let me know if you can see a Falcon 9 on pad 39A out there at Cape Canaveral. It's time for another Starlink launch. It's a different Starlink launch today. We'll be talking about what's different about the mission in just a second, but let's go ahead and say who's going to be on the list here today. Out in the field, I believe we have Chris and Thomas. Chris Gebhardt, we got you on?
We do indeed. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me loud and clear?
All right, let us know if you can hear Chris Gebhardt there, assistant managing editor for NASA's spaceflight.
Oh, I like that.
Spaceflight.
Oh, we have to change the business cards.
Yeah. He's at ChrisG_NSF on Twitter. Sounds like people can hear you just fine, Chris. And
excellent.
We also have out in the field Thomas Berghardt. Thomas, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, How's it going, everybody?
Hanging in there. Chat, let us know. Thomas, can you hear Thomas just fine? Both Chris and Thomas are out there on the causeway, right? Question mark?
Nope, you had a 50-50 chance and
causeway.
you blew it. We're at the KSC press site today for the launch from 39A.
The KSC press site. So this is the 39A launch, and you're watching not from the NASA Causeway, but from the regular press site over there, where we recently saw that core stage for SLS come in. That's near the press site, right?
Yep, in fact, the barge is still here, so yes.
All right, well, Pegasus saw it yet or anything. I don't know what the path of Pegasus is. But anyways, we've got a Starlink launch coming up in about 35 minutes here. You can see the clock in the upper left-hand corner. Back in the studio, we'll have Michael Baylor as well. Michael, you on?
Yes, I am, and the SpaceX launch director just gave the go for propellant load.
All right.
Woo-hoo!
Good deal.
Nice.
That is an important part of going to space, putting propellant in the rocket.
Well,
right there in the critical steps.
Yes, especially since right off the bat, what we can say is that they were very clear that they were monitoring weather in the recovery zone today. So that would at least be some sort of an indication that either the weather is a complete go or is trending in the right direction enough that they're comfortable with fueling the vehicle. So that's a good sign, but it's not 100% sure sign, but it's a good sign.
Gotcha. So y'all, lastly, here in the studio, my name is John Galloway. I'll be talking, I guess, and clicking on things, but less than 35 minutes now before this Starlink mission on the Falcon 9 from Space Launch, or just Launch Complex, not Space Launch Complex, from LC-39A out there at Kennedy Space Center. Again, we're the NASA Spaceflight team. We've rolled our own camera out there, so the view that you're seeing right now is on a tripod that Chris and Thomas can physically touch. That's our feed coming back. And during the course of the next 33 minutes and 49 seconds, we're going to be doing some live Q&A, telling you about the mission, and literally just hanging out to help people understand what the heck is going on with the Internet rocket. You can see it right there in the super chat. Axie saying, "Go Internet rocket, go." Thank you, Axie. So tell us a little bit about the mission today. Whichever one of y'all wants it. Chris, Thomas, y'all need to like rock, paper, scissors or something? Or
I listened to a story on NPR about rock, paper, scissors on the way down here, so I might be able to win.
Oh, no. I don't know if it gives you a competitive advantage.
All right, ready? Ready, go. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. I win! Yes!
No.
Anyway, okay. Yes, so this is Starlink mission V1 L26, which is launching after the L27 mission. They went slightly out of order in this regard, but this one is a very different Starlink mission than the ones that we are used to, because instead of there being 60 Starlink satellites, the maximum that they can put on a Falcon 9, there are only 52. And the reason for that is because there are two rideshare payloads. One is the Capella Whitney 4 microsatellite, and the other is Tyvac 0130. These are two microsatellites, around about 100 kilograms, or under 150 kilograms each. And because they have to go into roughly 550-kilometer orbits direct insertion. That means all of the Starlinks riding with them have to go into that much higher deployment orbit than normal. Starlinks normally deploy at an orbit of roughly 270 kilometers. This is going to deploy around 550 kilometers. And the reason for that, the small satellites have to go to that orbital altitude, so all the other Starlinks have to ride along with them. So that means you can't put all 60 of them inside the Falcon 9 payload fairing for a couple of reasons. One, there's very little room once all 60 are in there for anything else. So you would automatically have to be taking some of them out to add these other two rideshare payloads in. But the other big one is that this is an orbit that's flinging up very, very high, and the higher you go, the less mass you can take because the more propellant you have to burn. So this is one of those missions where they're having to trade and balance the mass of the total payload and how many Starlinks that means to be able to get everything into the proper orbit while reserving enough propellant to fire up that second stage engine again and deorbit it so it doesn't become space debris. So that's a big difference on this particular mission. The satellites will deploy, the two rideshare satellites will deploy about 56 minutes and 1 hour after liftoff, and the Starlinks will deploy roughly 98 minutes after liftoff over northern Mexico within range of the Boca Chica ground tracking station in Texas. So that's sort of a rough overview of today. This is also booster 1058. It is the one that debuted on the Demo 2 flight with Bob and Doug. It has the NASA worm logo on it, making its 8th flight today. It will be landing or attempting a landing on, of course, I Still Love You, which is located about 630 kilometers northeast of here off the coast of South Carolina. The two payload fairings, after they separate, will also parachute back down into the Atlantic for recovery by the Sheila Bordelon, which is about 730 kilometers northeast of here off the coast of off the coast of North Carolina. And both of the payload fairings on today's mission are being reused. The active half last supported the Sirius XM-7 launch in December of 2020, and the passive half supported the NROL 108 flight also in December of last year. So the only thing brand new on this rocket are the 54 satellites on board and the second stage.
All righty. And I am going to ask, we've just crossed over the T-minus 30-minute mark there. How is the weather looking? Those trees look like it's a little bit windy out there. And if we back off just a hair to bring up the fleet cam, got some puffy clouds. How's the weather looking?
Yes, weather's actually looking really good. It is mostly clear over the launch complex and in the direction that the rocket will pitch and travel. There is a nice strong breeze coming in off of the Atlantic, but nothing here at the ground that would be a problem for the Falcon 9. Watching the weather in the recovery zone, but things do seem to be trending in the right direction. But again, nothing is certain in rocketry in a countdown until the countdown reaches 0 and the rocket begins to climb.
Right.
So stay tuned. But things definitely looking good weather-wise, at least here at the launch site, yes.
All right, good deal. And we'll be watching the stream from both of the cameras here. It's going to be a daytime launch, so on Fleet Cam, it's going to be a little point of bright light, maybe going through some clouds out there. But we'll have the close-up at the press site, correctly labeled there. No.
Indeed. Now, one thing, too, for any of our viewers who are watching in Eastern Canada, about 100 minutes after liftoff, so very shortly after the Starlinks separate, they will be passing over the Great Lake regions, out over Ontario and Quebec, and over some of the maritime provinces as they head out on their orbital track over the ocean. And the only reason I mention this is because it's a visible pass of 60 very tightly packed Starlink satellites very shortly after liftoff. So if you are in Eastern Canada and it's clear, watch this launch and watch the little ground track and go outside and see if you can see it. Yes.
Excellent. That is a sight to see. If you ever see a Starlink train going over right after launch like this, it looks crazy. It looks like we're being invaded, quite frankly. So, it's something you want to see. If you're up there in the Northeast, make sure you step outside far Eastern Canada and be looking at the sky. If it happens and it goes over, it'll be hard to miss in the sky, I have a feeling.
Yeah, you'll see it.
Yeah, you will see it. Got a lot of super chats coming in here. Buddy says Doge to the moon. Not today. Not quite high enough apoapsis there to get all the way to the moon, but we appreciate the support. Musical Wolves with a question: what's the highest wind a Falcon 9 has launched in? Do we know what the ground wind constraints? So many winds.
So there are ground wind constraints as to what the highest is. There have definitely been some where they've flirted with the will the ground winds be too high. I believe. Oh, you know what? It is. If you go to NASA's website, there is a Falcon 9 launch commit criteria for crew, and the ground wind speed is in there somewhere, I believe.
Gotcha.
But I don't know it off the top of my head with enough accuracy to feel comfortable saying it. But it's high, and it's not a concern today. Basically.
Not a concern today. So as much as those trees are moving in the foreground, that is not a concern for the launch today. Coming up in 26 minutes now, it looks like. Here is Nicotine Jenkins. What's up, Jenkins? Says the 5x5 from SpaceX McGregor. Let's light this candle. Thanks for stopping in, Jenkins. I want to say Leroy instead of Nicotine, but I'm not sure that's exactly right. Warriston says, smack that like and sub button. Those are euros. I swear I couldn't have done that. I didn't put that in because I couldn't pay in euros. But we appreciate you, Warriston, for the reminder to smack buttons on YouTube if you like this sort of stuff. Terzinator
I do have the weather criteria. It is 30 miles for crude, 30 miles per hour for a crude launch. I'm not sure, though, if that changes for a launch that does not have an abort system. But for Crew Dragon launches, at least, it is 30 miles per hour.
Excellent. So yeah, I think that is. So that would mean that regular Falcon 9s are usually a bit higher, because I know that ground wind constraint for crew is so that the crew capsule doesn't get blown back toward land if they have to abort off the pad. So yes, there we go.
Gotcha. I'm going to keep grabbing a couple more here. Terzinator asks, will this launch be visible in Rochester, New York, or is it too light out?
Still too much daylight. This will not be visible up the east coast of the United States like a night launch will. No.
Okay, gotcha. So not quite going to... I mean, hey, Terzinator, if it didn't cost you much, just maybe go outside and look up. Maybe you never know what you'll see, but difficult to see probably right in this lighting slot, especially since we're 24 minutes from the launch. Let's see here. Oh, look at this. Robert Hobson coming through with the $99.99, $100 there. With I'm not supposed to say Bob Hob, because that's Jack's thing to say. Robert, we appreciate you very much, sincerely. The other end of the spectrum says, wondering if DOS has reformed his body back into a stable form. What do you mean back into a stable form? I don't think I was ever in a stable form, Robert. But
I hear you had some. I hear technology had a appearance during NSFLive for you.
They had trouble getting a firm lock. I needed like a transporter beacon or something on my shoulder because they could not get me beamed up.
Transport enhancers.
Yeah, there you go.
I just think it was the beginning of the robot uprising. You started this, DOS.
I have not taught them to teleport themselves or anything else yet. I think we're fine there. Bob, thank you so much for the $100. A name we see with those big support numbers in chat quite frequently. We really appreciate you,
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see here. Christopher Tilley says, whoever downvoted needs to apologize. I mean, I guess I can't argue with that. Maybe just undownvote. Kyle Trick says, in Florida this weekend, watching with your dad, Gene. So Kyle and Gene, thanks y'all for tuning in, and hope we get a good launch for you here today. Here's Roseanne DeVasto, $20 in, no question, actually. Just lots of thanks. We appreciate you, Roseanne.
Thank you
for that. Let's see. Here's another question about visibility. Love your stream, guys. Love it. Would you think I might be able to see... I could see the train from Arkansas as they're being deployed. DOS Fan Club, Chris Fan Club, Thomas Fan Crab, actually there. Arkansas?
No. It's still going to be light enough on the ground here in Florida 90 minutes after liftoff, or 100 minutes when they come over. You know, and if it's light enough here that we wouldn't be able to see them, you're not going to be able to see them in Arkansas, is my point, because you're farther west. So it will be lighter. The main the main chance of seeing them is really going to be Eastern Canada. today.
Gotcha. All right.
Now, yeah, and unfortunately, the way orbital mechanics works, their passes get earlier every single day. So it's not like you can even wait until tomorrow or something, because it goes the opposite way with orbital mechanics and sun lighting angles, where their pass will get earlier and earlier each day over you. So unfortunately, not Arkansas, not this time. But hey, there are hundreds more of these, so wait.
Yeah.
You'll get one.
I mean, there's a ton of questions about that. Like, can I see it from here? Can I see it from the UK? Can I see it from there? There are websites where you can go. We won't be able to answer every single location question there, but if you go to flightclub.io, one of the mods, get that link in the chat. Flightclub.io has a special section of the website where you can help plan passes, and they'll tell you should they be visible, given the ground track, how many times in the future, that sort of stuff. So if you're trying to figure out if you might be able to see these from here or from where you are, go to flightclub.io and go to their Declan's special Starlink visibility planning tool that he's got there on flightclub.io. Just going to keep speedrunning some of these questions here. David Goldsmith, appreciate the support. That's a new member. William Hugh Murray, CISSP. All right. $4.99, no message, but we appreciate you. We'll take it. Paul with an asterisk. It's like, Paul, there should be a disclaimer down below that, but I didn't see this. Appreciate you. Cadwa as well with some curly L's, actually 20 of them. Brett H.
Nice.
And Derek Tweedy. And let's see if we can get a question out of here somewhere.
As you're waiting for a question, I know Thomas has an observation he really wants to make.
Go for it.
Oh, was it that obvious? Yeah. Well, I was talking about this on Twitter ahead of this launch. So there's something interesting going on at the Space Center right now. We're looking at pad 39A, where the Falcon 9 is getting ready for the next Starlink mission, coming up in under 20 minutes now. There are two other sort of pre-launch flows happening in very close vicinity to us. At the press site, we're standing near the vehicle assembly building, where we've got two fully stacked and fully fueled solid rocket boosters for Artemis 1 stacked. And of course, the core stage is sitting in the transfer aisle in there. Stacking for that should happen in a couple weeks or so. So there's a pre-launch flow there, including some fueled hardware. Also, the fueled Orion capsules around here somewhere. So there's some fueled Artemis 1 hardware over to our left. And if we look over to our right, we can actually see at pad 41, Space Launch Complex 41, an Atlas V rocket rolled out earlier today. And that rocket will be supporting the Sibers Geo 5 mission launching on Monday. And over there, not only do they have two, again, fueled solid rocket boosters, but they have actually loaded their RP-1 kerosene into that first stage. And I want to talk about this briefly. Falcon 9 also uses RP-1 kerosene, and in fact, you can see that T-minus 20-minute vent indicating that RP-1 kerosene loading into the second stage has completed. Perfect timing, Falcon 9. But both rockets use the same propellant, RP-1. However, they use different temperature RP-1 kerosene. At SpaceX, they super chill it and densify it so that they can fit more into the tanks, and that's why they load kind of at the last minute. The whole fueling timeline is just 35 minutes. However, over on pad 41, even though they're not launching until Monday, they have already loaded the RP-1 kerosene into the first stage because it's just at ambient temperature, and since they're not loading any liquid oxygen, there's also not a safety risk in doing that. So it's a difference in approach as far as fueling goes, and of course, over at 41, they'll load their liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen closer to launch on Monday because those need to be kept very, very cold, and so if you load them too early, they'll just all boil off. And then, of course, once you have RP-1 or RP-1 and oxygen, you have an explosion risk, which is why you don't do that till you're ready to light the engines. But some interesting pre-launch flows, and technically 3 different fueled rockets in the vicinity of the Kennedy Space Center right now. So some pretty cool and some pretty busy times on the Space Coast right now.
I'm curious, Thomas. The rocket seems to be leaking. Is that normal?
That is completely normal. So that T-minus 20-minute vent is just them purging the ground lines on the transporter erector as they move between stage 2 fueling modes. They were fueling RP-1 kerosene. They finished that. Now they're going to get ready to load liquid oxygen into the second stage. Meanwhile, the first stage was getting filled with both RP-1 and liquid oxygen at the same time, and that's still ongoing. But that T-minus 20-minute vent is completely nominal and a good sign that the countdown is proceeding smoothly.
Do you know that sometimes we get YouTube comments and they're like, oh my gosh, that DOS guy is clueless. He doesn't know anything. Y'all realize I asked Thomas that on purpose, right? Like I was prompting him to give us an explanation.
It was a good setup, DOS. I appreciate it.
You knocked it out of the park. I put it on the tee for you right there, and you just whack. You just knocked it out of the park, Thomas. People are like, "Oh my gosh, DOS has to ask everything." It's like my job to ask people these questions, folks. Has the water tower started leaking yet?
That's not normally if they do get to that point where they sort of overflow the water tower when they're prepping the sound suppression system, that normally only happens like a minute before liftoff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we haven't seen that yet, but keep an eye out for that. If that happens, that's also normal too. We don't see it every single time, but I think more often than not, that water tower actually overflows when they're getting ready to put on the sound suppression system at the base of the rocket.
Gotcha.
It's the simplest way to know it's full. They just have an overflow valve at the top of it. So there's no sense. So you just fill it, and when it starts leaking, full. I love it.
All right. Again, folks, hey, we're 16 minutes and 45 seconds away from a potential launch here. We're standing by. That's a Falcon 9 rocket. It has 50, how many? 52? 54?
Yes.
52.
52. It's got 52 Starlink satellites on board, and then 2 Rideshares going up on the Falcon 9 into a little bit of a non-standard release orbit trajectory. I don't know. How do y'all want to call that? It's higher than they normally release Starlinks, right?
It's a different insertion orbit. So the second stage of Falcon 9 is inserting the payloads into a higher orbit than they normally would if it was just Starlinks. And that's partly because we talked about earlier, there's the mass constraints. On Starlink missions, when it's pure Starlinks, all of the satellites have their own maneuvering system, so they can do orbit raising on their own. The 2 Rideshare microsatellites do not have their own propulsion systems. They just coast on orbit, and so they can't raise their orbit, so they get inserted directly into that higher orbit where they can operationally conduct their missions.
Gotcha. Thomas, I'm going to ask, how much caffeine did you have to drink before this broadcast?
None. Why am I?
You are competing with my rate of speaking. Like, I speak very quickly sometimes, and you are almost leaving me in the dust today. You sound excited about this launch.
It's time for a rocket launch. I'm excited. I don't know, DOS.
This is what happens when you give an employee a week off. They come back happy and excited.
All right. So again, y'all, coming up on 15 minutes here. We're the NASA Spaceflight team doing some live Q&A. Can't get that anywhere else from the SpaceX Falcon 9 launch here today. Speaking of which, let's get some more Q&A.
Yeah.
Rough Riders was asking, do we know of any updates on the stored Falcon Heavy boosters, 1053 and 1054? They have signs of life. Are they scrapped for parts? What's happening?
Yeah, so we touch on this a little bit in our launch article today, where we did a sort of overview of the Falcon 9 fleet. And yeah, the two side boosters that were used for the Arabsat 6A and the STP-2 Falcon Heavy flights back in 2019 are here. And somewhat perplexingly, right, Elon had always said that the side boosters were just Falcon 9s, that instead of having interstages, black interstages where it would connect to the upper stage, you just put a nose cone on them because that's all they need for aerodynamics, right? And SpaceX had made a big deal about how reconfigurable these were so that if they ever needed to pull them or they wanted to pull them to be part of the basic Falcon 9 fleet, they could do it. So when they lost 2 boosters in back-to-back landing incidents last year on the Starlink 4 and 5 mission, a lot of us suspected they would grab those 2 boosters and reconfigure them, stick interstages on them, and put them in the fleet as replacements. They didn't do that, so we thought, well, maybe they could stand to lose 2. And then they lost a 3rd one earlier this year, and they're still not making strides that they've talked about in terms of converting these things. And instead, they pulled a booster that had only flown once from the West Coast and brought it here. And in fact, it will launch the next Starlink mission out of here on the 26th. So what they're doing with them is a great question. We don't know, but for whatever reason, they are absolutely convinced they don't need them in the fleet.
It's also worth noting, though, that the inverse also hasn't happened. We haven't seen them, say, like Elon hasn't said we scrapped them or we took the Merlins out and put them. So, we also haven't confirmed that they're scrapped or something. So they might literally still be sitting around and available. We're going to have to wait and see. But yeah, so far they haven't activated them like we would have expected them to.
Yeah. Now, to the other side of that question, sort of the flip side of that question that wasn't really asked, there are 2 boosters that will be joining the sort of larger fleet. They're already part of the but the one that launched the Crew 1 mission back in November was then held at the request of NASA for Crew 2. So it couldn't do anything else until the Crew 2 flight launched, but it did that mission very successfully last month. So now it's available for general flight assignment. And in mid-June, June 17th, the GPS-3 5 satellite that will be launching on a Falcon 9 is launching on the same booster that back in November of last year launched the GPS-3 satellite and was then held at the request of the U.S. Space Force for the next GPS mission. So you do have two boosters that are part of the fleet but are now going to be available for general assignment here, which will help alleviate some of the stress on the other boosters that are, oh boy, doing it all.
All right. Well, I'm going to get a couple more of the questions coming through here. Usually when we get close to launch, like we get within a couple minutes of launch, we put a moratorium on the live questions and stuff. So let's see if we can get through a couple more of these before we get that close. Just over 11 minutes now on the Falcon 9. But Robbie Bradley says, hey guys, as always, thank you for what y'all do and keeping us up to date. I'm in the final countdown to my trip to KSC next week, taking my 4-year-old nephew and 6-year-old niece for the first time. They love rockets and are excited. That will be a cool trip, Robbie. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Go see Atlantis. Walk around the Rocket Garden and go see Atlantis. If you don't do anything else, you got to do those things. And if you've got time for it, a trip over to the Saturn V Center as well. If you're going to the KSC Visitors Complex, taking the optional bus trip over to the Saturn V Center, it has an entire Saturn V moon rocket laying on its side and a massive, it's something to see, isn't it, Chris?
It really is. And they are doing some of those tours. Again, make sure to talk to the Visitor Center and make sure, I believe it's pre-booking. I believe
you can
it's
book once you get there. If you walk up, you can book there. Yeah.
Okay, you can do that again. Still definitely worth calling because I know a lot of places like the new regulations, the new what's this, as we're getting back to normal, just call and make sure. But yes, the bus tours are running again, so you can do that for the Saturn V Center.
Absolutely. Hey, there's a hidden sort of thing too. Don't miss the Dragon and the Orion capsules. There's like a little side thing next to the theater. A lot of people don't know about it at the Visitors Complex, but they have these capsules you can ride up next to. Were those Pathfinders recovered in some cases? There's all sorts of different stuff in there.
There are two flown, but there's also a sort of mock-up Starliner capsule in that same exhibit. But there are two flown space capsules. One is the first Dragon that ever went to the International Space Station, the COTS 2 Cargo Dragon 1. And then there's also the Orion capsule from the Exploration Flight Test 1, the EFT-1 mission. Both of those capsules have been to space and back, and they are on display at the Kennedy Space Center right next to the IMAX Theater. It's kind of hidden away. Highly recommend checking that out.
Gotcha. That's going to be a cool trip, though, and the beaches and everything else as well. But thank you so much for sharing that with us, Robbie. Here is Mark Lamb saying, got my Starship SN15 Landing Club mug and sticker. Awesome. Talking about SN15 there, asking if there was any damage from the fire. Since we're 9 minutes away from a Falcon launch, not going to go into too much detail, but make sure you stay tuned. When things happen in Boca Chica, we will be covering them there on live streams and the daily videos. So thanks for the support. And we will move on to talk about.
I'm
Falcon
not aware
9.
of any damage.
Yeah, we didn't see any damage or anything like that where they're replacing pieces. Here's A Sticks. You kids coming to Vandenberg Space Force Base for the inaugural Firefly, or July for Transporter 2. Michael,
I'll be there for both. For sure.
You're in that neck of the woods.
I will say Transporter 2 is actually going to be from Florida, so I will not be at Transporter 2. But the inaugural launch of Firefly, I will for sure be there for.
Gotcha. All right. Of course, we'll try to cover as many of those things as we can. That's for sure. Here is Grant Johnson. What would the flight director's go-to warp slogan for Falcon 9 be?
What would the launch director's slogan for what be?
For go to warp, like engage.
I
don't
say
understand.
I am biased toward the simple yet effective Captain Picard. Engage.
Huh. All right, I like it.
Or if you wanted it to be a joke, shut up, Wesley. I'm glad you laughed. I'm glad someone got that. Yes.
I think we can say that on the stream, right?
Yes, we definitely can say that on the stream.
Karen
and
Snyder,
if you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch season 1 of Next Generation.
We'll have to answer this one really quickly. I'm trying to stay on top of them, but you know us. Karen Snyder asked, is the integration tower at all similar to the Boca Chica tower? So the tower
Nope.
here was Space Shuttle, wasn't it? And more.
Apollo, Saturn
Yeah.
V. Yeah, what you are looking at is not at all similar to what will be at Boca Chica, except for maybe it's a tower and there's a lightning rod on it, and there will be a crew arm, but that's it. That's really the only similarity. What you are seeing here in Florida was originally used to launch the Apollo Saturn V rockets. They were on the big mobile launch platforms that took the Saturn Vs out to the launch pad, and then when we were transitioning from the Saturn program, or through the Apollo program, over to the Space Shuttle program, they reused those mobile towers and just deconstructed the tower segment on the mobile launch platform and built a fixed tower at 39A and B. When SpaceX took over 39A, they kept it because they needed a tower for crew. And so that tower, that steel that you are looking at, has launched Saturn V rockets to the moon. It launched 84 space shuttle missions off of Pad 39A, and it has now hosted Falcons since January of 2017 and Falcon Heavies.
All right. So beyond the fact that they are towers that stand next to rockets, they are not like the same design or anything like that. A good question. I don't think we've got that one before. Here is Big Willie. Appreciate you watching. Watching from St. Augustine, Florida. Love your work and coverage of the launches, guys. Thank you. You are welcome, Willie. Thank you for tuning in. Nigel
you
Freeman,
should see it in St. Augustine, so yes.
Yeah, you should definitely see it that close. Nigel Freeman's a new member. Sebastian Froment is also a new member, and Rick Thomas as well. And I think we've got, there's Ekote? Not sure I pronounced that correctly, but thank you. Brandon Carroll, we appreciate the support. Thank you so much for tuning in. And then here is, all right, Crafty Geek, Starlink related question. And we're at 5.5, so this may be the last question we get to here. Do we have an NET for the launch of the first batch of Starlinks that includes the LaserLink hardware upgrade?
So Gwynn Shotwell has talked a little bit about this. There's not a whole lot of info out there, but Gwynn Shotwell has said in some, conference appearances and stuff like that they've already tested the laser interlink technology a little bit. We don't know exactly how many satellites that was involved with, but we know they have already flown some of these LaserLink hardware satellites. Don't know, but unfortunately, I can't talk to how common those are on, per se, this mission. Don't know if there's any on this mission, or they could all have them. There's not a whole lot of official info out there, but we know they've already started testing those, so there are some already flown with that laser interlink hardware on.
The Transporter 1 batch of satellites all have lasers.
Okay, so there's a little extra info there.
Every Starlink that they're launching to a polar orbit will have lasers. Eventually, the entire constellation.
Communication lasers, right? Not like,
yes.
Okay.
Not pew, 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 yeah.
Just making sure, yeah, okay. Let's see here. Retro fan sneaking through as well, saying, how about a shout out for, the suborbital kinetic X from Wallops around 8:03. So another launch, hopefully not scrubbing tonight. Isn't that black
it's not a great track record up there in Wallops recently, but we'll see.
I was gonna say I'm not gonna hold my breath for that one.
We'll see how that goes. We know they've got that sounding rocket that's been going out of Wallops nightly for the last week or so, right?
And there is a visibility map for that. So if you go to NASA Wallops on Twitter, you can see the visibility map and see if you are within that zone. Although I'm sorry to the person who asked the first question from Arkansas, you are not in that zone either. So sorry.
There you go. Billy Day says, thanks guys for another live stream. And we've got Laurie Jones Wilson saying, thanks for everything the team does. Everything else in the queue are questions. And since we're coming up on T-3 minutes, I think we're going to go ahead and take a moratorium on the live questions and see if we get a launch here, right?
Yes, indeed. So at this point in the countdown, the strong back, the transporter erector, has pulled back to its pre-launch position of 88.5 degrees. At T0, at the moment of ignition, at the moment of liftoff, it will throw back to 45 degrees to protect itself and its systems from the acoustical and heat energy of the business end of the Falcon 9 as it lifts off the pad. This throwback technique is designed to decrease the amount of time it takes to turn around the transporter erector between missions. There is our final 2.5-minute vent from the Falcon 9, a puff that we would normally expect, although that did not continue as I expected it to. But I'm going to keep talking until I hear something different.
The visibility conditions are not, it's not super humid or anything, so some of the vents
Yeah.
are going to look smaller than normal. We're all on track.
Yeah, sorry, that's what stopped me, is it didn't look the same real quick. But anyway, once we have liftoff, Falcon 9 will perform first a pitch maneuver to put itself on the proper azimuth or compass heading to achieve the 53-degree inclination orbit that it needs. After it has completed the pitch program, it will conduct a roll program to place itself into the proper orientation for the initial climb out of Earth's atmosphere. First stage flight is expected to last just over 2.5 minutes, followed by shutdown of the stages, separation, and then ignition of the upper stage to continue taking the vehicle and the payload onward to orbit as the first stage heads toward the drone ship off the coast of the Carolinas. Right now, just over about 90 seconds to go until the planned liftoff of the Falcon 9 here at 18:56 local. There is the 2-minute vent I was really
There we
expecting.
go.
Okay, thank you.
And the water tower as well. There's the water
and
tower
the water
leaking.
towers, yes.
All
the good leaks are happening.
all the good leaks that we expect for a launch.
But this is the mood I'm in. But all good leaks must come to an end when everything buttons up and the rocket goes up.
All right, folks. So here we are, about a minute. Chris, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the microphone over there so y'all do your microphone distancing act. And we will be listening in on the launch here coming up in about 50 seconds now, y'all. One more quick note. We are also, SpaceX streams as well, but SpaceX's stream is now going to have a massive delay on it. So you may see some events twice. We don't get a feed from SpaceX in anything near real time anymore. So there may be a big delay. Like you may see separation on our stream, and it's still 20 or 30 seconds before the SpaceX stream shows any separation. So just be advised, our stream is less than 7 seconds. It happens in real life. It gets to our servers. It gets all the way to you. SpaceX is a little bit more latency, almost up to a minute for some of you out there. So here we go, 15 seconds. I'll be quiet.
And we have a liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket from 39A with 52 new Starlink satellites nearly completing the first orbital shell.
And it's going to take just a second for that sound to get to our microphones here. Here it comes. Just see it on fleet cam there, in between the clouds.
Indeed, and there we go. There is the contrail as Falcon 9 goes through 12 kilometers in altitude. Normal for a liquid-fueled rocket. A gorgeous initial ascent of the vehicle out of 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center. The vehicle's pitch program executing as programmed. The vehicle now gaining a lot more horizontal acceleration than vertical acceleration, which is exactly what you need to make orbit. So far, so good for the Falcon 9. Into almost cloudless skies from our vantage point, although it was definitely more cloudier from fleet cam there. But there she goes. You can see the plume expansion in the upper atmosphere. here as we head toward booster shutdown and separation.
From both angles here, actually on the SpaceX camera, Thomas and Chris are in that shot somewhere. They may be behind the rocket or the fire, but got it from one end as they look up the tailpipe of the rocket, and then looking from the rocket back on down, you can actually see the beach down there on the coast of Florida. That's cool.
Totally can, and we can still see it clearly with the naked eye here. Thomas doing a great track as it heads down the center of the range here, standing by for booster cutoff momentarily. And we have booster cutoff visually from the ground. And that's probably all we're going to be able to discern with the naked eye from the ground. Oh no, I see the second stage ignition with the naked eye. Yeah, I see it. And Thomas has got it too. Awesome. All right.
I have it. It's gonna go away soon, I think.
Yeah, I think it will too.
It is a very small dot.
Yeah. If you blink, you're going to lose it.
All right, but you can see that everything continuing to go well from a telemetry standpoint as well. You can see the first stage there, about 92 kilometers in altitude and climbing.
The shots of the Merlin vacuum engine there are what we're seeing switching back and forth. Chris, remember to give a little separation between the mics there, please.
Yep, I stepped back. Sorry.
Thank you. And there's payload pairing separation, exposing the Starlink satellites.
And you can see both of the stages are have crossed the 100-kilometer barrier there into space. You can see velocity decreasing on the first stage as expected as it arcs up toward apogee. And you can see the acceleration and altitude continuing to climb on stage 2. So far, everything looking good.
Yep. This is, of course, where we get that thruster firings helping guide that booster on the left-hand side down towards the drone ship. This is why they put the drone ship 600 kilometers downrange. The booster's just sort of arcing towards it. It's almost like throwing a baseball and hitting the drone ship in the middle. Not really the middle of the Atlantic, but in the Atlantic Ocean.
Right. I love all the little white puffs of clouds underneath the rocket right now.
Yeah.
All right, and it looks like the rocket is, or the first stage is nearing apogee there at 118 kilometers. And is gaining velocity, so it has started the downward trajectory back into the atmosphere.
The second stage continues to go towards orbit. It continues to increase its velocity so that it can stay up there. It's being pulled towards the Earth by gravity just like everything else around here, and it has to get going fast enough so that when it falls due to gravity, it misses the Earth. It'll keep accelerating that Merlin vacuum engine all the way up until Seco, which is well past the entry burn and a little bit after the landing there on the timeline.
Yeah,
the best way to describe orbit is to throw yourself at the Earth and miss. That's all an orbit is.
Yes.
So easy to explain, or so easy to say out loud, I guess, and so hard to actually accomplish.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, the expected separation of events today is roughly 20 seconds from the time the booster touches down to stage engine cutoff for second stage orbit insertion.
Gotcha.
But coming up shortly, about a minute or so away from the entry burn here with the Falcon 9. First stage, that second stage, just over 13,000 kilometers now. Just over 13,000 kilometers an hour now in velocity there on the second stage. Things looking good telemetry-wise, and standing by for the entry burn, which will begin to slow the Falcon 9 down. It'll do two things. It'll slow the booster down to reduce the amount of heat that builds up around it as it's coming back into the denser lower atmosphere. But it also basically fights fire with fire. It uses the fire of its engines to create a firewall and basically thermally protect the back end of the vehicle as it's coming down. And there is that entry burn underway right now.
Yep. So again, slightly slowing itself down, targeting the drone ship. Remember, the drone ship is down there station keeping, You can really see the little puffy clouds now. Look at that, Chris.
Yeah, you can. Now, I hope this feed holds as they transition before them, because the last 2 times we have been treated to epic shots of the drone ship just appearing beneath it as it heads down toward its landing. But again, also very much keep your eye on that second stage. We always say landings are cool, but what matters is what's on the second stage. That came true very sadly this morning for Rocket Lab, which successfully recovered the first stage of Electron, but lost the mission due to a second stage failure at the time that the second stage started up after separation. So definitely keep your eye on the booster. It's a cool thing. It's important. Definitely 100% keep your eye on that second stage telemetry to make sure it reaches orbit successfully.
But Chris, also this is Bob and Doug's booster, so I think it's super important to get this booster back.
Well, that too. Yes, yes.
It belongs in a museum, right?
Well, yeah, this is the one that returned human spaceflight launch capability to the United States. So yes, definitely.
I'm just kidding. There we go. It came back.
Did it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
The SpaceX feed froze for a second.
I thought it was my phone for a second.
Yeah, no, that was
Except
what
Thomas
we were getting.
made the same
from SpaceX.
face.
So here comes the landing.
Here it comes. Oh, look at this! 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 I'm gonna try to use my calm voice. Wait for the drone ship to appear.
There's the drone ship right down there. You can see the grid fins working. Look at that.
Come on, baby. Come on.
No seagulls on the deck.
Good for them.
Oh, right over.
There go the
Here come
legs.
legs. And ta-da! On the drone ship successfully.
So we got
Almost
smooth,
dead center.
Yeah,
Look at
we
that.
got smooth
I think
video
that-
from the drone ship.
I think that
Sure.
left leg is outside the yellow inner circle. I don't know if that's an
Yeah,
acceptable
come on,
landing.
space. Yeah, come on, SpaceX. What are you doing?
2 inches off. Do over.
Yeah, we had the rocket
But here
all
we
the
go.
way down
Second
there.
stage shut down. Hang on. Second stage just shut down at the approximate time in the 27,522 kilometers per hour. That's orbit, my friends.
Excellent.
That is our initial parking orbit. So I want to take a moment to talk about parking orbits, because we use this phrase a lot, and I want to make sure we all sort of understand what it means. Parking orbit is basically a fancy way of saying you are in a stable orbit, right? You're not suborbital or anything like that. So if your engine didn't reignite, you're still stable to a degree for an orbit or two. You're not necessarily stable, but you're good for a couple of revolutions. But basically, it's just the intermediate orbit you put the rocket into. And then you allow it to coast upward to apogee, or the highest point in its orbit. And then you reignite the engine to raise perigee, the lowest point in your orbit. In this particular case, the parking orbit is just an intermediate step before going into Earth orbit, which is what this mission is doing. We also use the term parking orbit to sometimes refer to orbits around Earth that spacecraft are first put into before, like 20 minutes later, they're sent outward to the moon or Mars or Venus or out beyond Earth orbit. But parking orbit is just basically a big fancy way of saying it's not where we really want to be, but we're good to take a rest here right now.
Excellent. And this one is going to do another little teeny tiny puff burn in a while, right?
Ah, good question,
Is it
Dawson.
or no?
So
Because sometimes
no.
they do usually. Aha.
Yes. So on the normal ones, right? So the Falcon 9 second stage has an incredible thrust to weight ratio, especially when it is nearly depleted of propellants like it is right now. So what we're used to on Starlink missions, right, is they need like a basic 1 second puff from the engine when they reach apogee to raise the perigee up to what they need to. But that's when we're going into a roughly circular 270 kilometer orbit. We're aiming for a roughly circular 550 kilometer orbit this time.
Okay.
Which means you have to burn the engine longer. If you want to go higher, you have to go faster, and you have to burn your engine longer. So instead of a 1 second puff, it's a 4 second puff this time.
Aha. So it's just going to be in an overall higher orbit, so it's not going to be the little that we see sometimes. It'll be, well, I'm not going to do more of like a for 4 seconds.
What
yeah,
I
but
love,
that's about right.
yeah. I mean, basically, I would describe it like this. During a normal Starlink mission, if you're not sure you saw the stage do anything, it did the thing it needed to do. You're going to see it noticeably do something with the engine. this time. The engine will
Right.
kind of start to glow, but not a lot in this case, yeah.
Okay.
And then the
there
other
we
big difference is the Starlinks normally deploy about an hour after liftoff on normal flights. Because this is a rideshare flight, the 2 rideshares deploy first, 56 minutes and an hour after liftoff, and then 98 minutes, 10 seconds after liftoff, yes, it's that precise, is when the 52 Starlinks will separate over northern Mexico when they're within range of the Boca Chica tracking station.
Gotcha. Any I mean, 92 minutes from now, that's what, 7:30. That's not nighttime at Boca Chica. That's not even sundown at Boca Chica.
No, unfortunately, being summer in the north, or well, meteorological summer starts soon. But yeah, basically being late spring, early summer here in the northern hemisphere, 7:30 is not enough to see them.
Yeah, okay. Because, I mean, we've got cameras at Boca Chica as well. I'd be interested to see some Starlinks go over Starship down there, but doesn't sound like tonight is going to be the night that we get to see that happen, unfortunately.
No. Still very firmly daylight at 7:30 p.m., sadly.
Gotcha. Let me grab a couple more thanks here. AZ, thank you for the membership. And Bart Hepler as well is a new member. Richard Vaughn, too. Trying to get all those to display. There goes some of them. Excellent. And there's Richard Vaughn. Yep, got it. Richard Vaughn also with the super chat saying pew, pew, pew. Apparently, talking about the lasers. They're communications lasers, Richard. They don't go pew, pew. Mike Smith, thank you so much for the $10, saying, how long will these sats take to be usable since they are at around the needed insertion? There are...
It's true. Yeah, so it'll take less time. There'll be less time for orbit raising. So in theory, they will reach their operational orbits a little bit faster. It depends, however, what orbital plane they're going into. They still may need to drift a bit to get to the actual slot in orbit that they need to. And that could have depended on if the 2 rideshare customers requested a more specific orbit than maybe is close to, but not exactly the Starlink orbit. So we don't know exactly how close they are, but you're right, there should be less orbit raising time because they're already into a higher orbit than their usual insertion orbit. So correct, a little less time for these sats to become operational.
And it takes more time to drift satellites into adjacent planes than it does to simply raise them to the orbital altitude they need to be in. And one way we change orbital planes after you've launched something is also by changing the altitude. So some of the Starlinks will have to lower themselves back down from the 550 kilometer altitude in order to spread out not just within the plane they're launching into, but to start to drift outward to the others as well. So it's not really a case where like shooting them into 550 direct kilometer orbits lowers the amount of time that it takes to get them operational, if that makes sense, because its orbital mechanics in orbit is weird. Is basically the answer to that. Basically, I think the larger question that's being asked here too is that initial shell, right? That the first 1,585 that are needed for the 550 kilometer, 53-degree inclination shell, all of them will be up on the next one, the Starlink L-28 flight that launches on the 26th. So that will technically be first shell all in orbit, but it will take months to get all of them to where they need to be to achieve that 80% coverage of the planet they've talked about to be able to really, expand the geographical areas where Starlink service is offered. So it will still be several months. Maybe by the end of the year, we'll see a significant increase in that, but just because all of them will be up there by the end of May doesn't mean that shell is complete. It will still take several months to get them where they need to go.
Makes sense. And here's another one about the Falcon 9 itself. Jim McNicholas was asking, look at the top of the Falcon 9. At the top of the fairing, it looks like it's clear, like there's a skylight. It's not clear, but they do have a different tip on the fairing, right?
Yeah, so it's not clear, although depending on what the sky behind it looked like, they could see how you would mistake that. Yeah, there is a little bit of thermal protection, a little bit of heat shield material at the very tip of the fairing. It's a darker gray than the sort of white payload fairing. So that's what you're seeing, and that's just to protect against extra heating on the way up. The fairing is not only there to reduce drag because satellites are not very aerodynamic, so you want to have a nice stable airflow around the rocket on the way up, but it also protects all of the payloads from the heating as a result of accelerating through the atmosphere at very high speeds. So that heat shield at the tip of the fairing just helps protect the fairing and the payloads below it from that launch heating.
And those things are noticeable on the Falcon 9, but they're not unique to the Falcon 9. That type of thermal protection system has definitely flown on the Delta IV before. But I've never seen it on an Atlas fairing. I think the Atlas composite fairings might be slightly different from RUAG.
Believe you're correct. I don't know if I've seen it on an Atlas before. Of course, someone will now correct us and say, no, actually, but
Actually,
on my head, I don't think so.
Yeah, which if so, please do. I've never seen them on the Atlas, but I've definitely seen them on the Delta. Yeah.
Yeah. Got just a couple more questions here, y'all. They are going to have to pack up here shortly, which will end our live broadcast. But we have time for a couple more. Yeah, a couple more. Here's a quick one from Ben Emery. Do the second stages just fall out of orbit and burn up? What is the destiny of this second stage today?
Right. So on these missions, they do reserve enough propellant to perform a deorbit burn. So the second stage, after it deploys the 2 rideshare payloads and the 52 Starlink satellites, they will also, after some time, they'll give some time for the satellites to separate from the upper stage and kind of space out a bit, no pun intended. But then the second stage will then relight. Chris just gave me a look for that.
No, sorry, it wasn't a look. I was laughing. Sorry.
The second stage will then kind of orient the other way around, point its engine into the direction it's orbiting, and fire its engine, again, very briefly, only a couple seconds needed, to reduce its velocity enough that you're back on a suborbital trajectory, and the stage will destructively re-enter Earth's atmosphere. Now, there have been a couple missions, including some Starlink missions, where that deorbit burn has actually failed, and if you remember, one result of that is a sort of uncontrolled re-entry, and we saw one of those over the Northwest United States, the Pacific Northwest, where a Falcon 9 second stage, a month or so after launch, did end up re-entering, not over the ocean where they normally deposit these things, but over some populated areas. Now, this is a little bit different from if you're thinking about that Chinese Long March 5 incident. This is a little bit different. We're talking about an upper stage, which is much, much smaller than the giant core stage from Changzhen 5. So there's some different consequences there. Generally speaking, even if the stage doesn't do a deorbit burn, when it does naturally decay and re-enter that way, almost all of it does burn up. Some of it can survive, bits and pieces can survive, but it's much less of a big consequence there than if it was a larger rocket stage. So even these upper stages, if they don't deorbit properly, are mostly safe to come back and re-enter. But if everything goes well, it will deorbit over the ocean, usually the Pacific Ocean, and re-enter where no one is around to be affected by any debris that does survive.
Yeah, and that odd occurrence where the stage did not reignite because of a failure of some kind, right? And it just came down passively, actually served as a good reminder of why we're so concerned about the Chinese rocket stage, right? Because even though the Falcon 9 second stage is really, really small compared to that, compared to the Shenzheng 5B core stage, which is what came back in uncontrolled, whole pressurization tanks of the second stage of the Falcon 9 survived the reentry and were found in eastern Washington state here in the U.S. So if a small stage like that can still have something relatively big compared to the size of the stage survive, right? Imagine what survives from like something the size of the SLS core, right? That's uncontrolled and just coming on in. And we've seen this because the first Shenzheng 5B stage came down over Cote d'Ivoire in Africa when they launched it, and gigantic pieces of it made it to the ground. It was honestly amazing that no one was hurt or worse. So, yes, it was an anomaly. Yes, they normally try to deorbit the stage, but the fact that something in a Falcon 9 makes it through reentry when it's not designed for shows you the problem the larger the stage gets in that regard.
Right. That makes good sense. Definitely something that we keep an eye out for. We don't just want to leave a bunch of space junk up there, especially as we start to launch more and more missions. It's really important that we're good stewards of the space around our planet so that we can keep going there without crashing into stuff. I could say it that way, right?
Yeah,
I like it. All right. Let's get just one or two more. I see some super chats coming in here. What's the blue line in the SpaceX feed? So we've got the SpaceX trajectory track there, and where there's a white line and a blue line.
Is that the planned orbit after the next burn? Is that what that is?
Yeah,
I would guess that's what that is.
I'm pretty sure the blue. Oh gosh.
It's interesting because it looks like the blue line
I
is
think
low.
one of them is if you didn't burn, this is where you'd be, and if
Right.
you did burn, this is where you'd be. I think that's what they are.
And the burn is just on the backside of the planet, so you don't see where they diverge, maybe.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that SES2 is coming up in a while, so that may be, current track versus where we want to be, I guess. I wonder. I mean,
Well, because it looks like it's above the. Because my first thought was ground track,
Right.
but it doesn't
Yeah.
track the other one, and it's above the horizon when it comes over the horizon. So, yeah, I think it's if you don't burn, it's where you'll be. Is the blue line, and gray line is where you want to be after the burn.
Gotcha. And some weirdness there with the two different lines. I guess it's taking into account the rotation of the planet or something like that. Huh. I wonder why those lines don't match up, right?
Well, it's also not. I mean, so launch trajectories are interesting, right? Because ideally you're targeting the center of the plane. But we know what the center of the plane was this time around. It was 654, but they changed it to 656. So it's possible that what one of those lines are is the actual plane you want to be in, and part of this burn is going to be a planar correction burn as well, which you can do
Right.
to some extent with your stage. We're throwing out options. I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm just saying you can, in your final adjustment burn, account for a planar difference with where you're trying to rendezvous. Because essentially what they're trying to do, it's kind of like going to the International Space Station, right? Except instead of one specific place in that orbit, it's the entire orbital plane you're trying to get into. But you're still trying to get into a very specific plane. So just like if they launched a couple of seconds late to get to the International Space Station, they'd have to correct for the planar difference with the station versus the orbit they ended up in. You have to do the same thing with Starlink. So it's possible that's what we're seeing too. It's also possible it's what we said before, a prediction where you want to be.
Good deal. Here's Neon Dan checking in saying, just saw it go over the Midlands, UK. Awesome. Nice,
Heyo.
Neon Dan. Saw the second stage go over, sounds like. We've got Blackhawk NZ says, Rip running out of toes. Oh, Rip running out of toes from the Rocket Lab launch there.
Yes,
And
indeed.
we've got Roseanne DeVasto says, gotcha. Gotcha, Roseanne. Yes, that is my catchphrase when it's like, gotcha. Like, I don't want to keep saying stuff because we'll talk about one topic for 30 minutes, so I just say gotcha, and then we move over to the next thing. You got me. Mark Lamb with the, let's take this as maybe the final question. Does the second stage do an orbit transition at some point? We were just talking, this is what we were just talking about. Actually, we've already answered this. So it is possible they're doing some sort of planar transition, or I don't know why that other track doesn't match the first track. You would think that if our guess about the blue track being where you are if you don't burn was correct, it would match the current trajectory.
Well, no, I think the gray one, because the stage is shown on the gray track, right? I think the gray track is the current track that will not change if you don't burn, and the blue track, which is slightly different.
The blue is the current track.
The blue,
Yeah,
because
100%. I rewinded the mission control audio and verified that.
yeah, okay.
Okay, all right, never mind.
Well, the blue track is super low.
Is lower,
yeah.
Which is why I think, because if you look at it right, we know Falcon 9 is in at least an orbit with a perigee of 163 kilometers, because that's where it was at when the engine cut off at Seco. So it's in at least that high of an orbit, aiming to get higher. So yeah.
All right. And then here, see, I skipped gotcha that time. I went with all right instead of gotcha. But here's the last one. This one's actually from Eric C., and it's a NASASpaceflight. Is this channel your full-time job? I don't know how you pump out so much awesome content that is exactly what I'm interested in. Some of us work on this part-time, and some of us work on this full-time, and some of this work on something else full-time and this full-time. We do, across the board, put a lot of time into bringing y'all cool content. I think it's YouTube that's showing you what you're interested in, though. I don't know if that's us.
Hey, we're gonna go with this, Utz.
Yeah, I'll take it. I think that might be YouTube saying, "Oh, here's what you're interested in: more rockets." My entire feed is rockets and horses. If you're on the NASA Spaceflight account, there's rockets and horses and Nightwish sometimes. So, anyways,
Soccer. Or sorry,
soccer.
football. My
Football
apologies.
on occasion.
Woohoo!
Like, who's
Oh,
logged
I saved
into this account?
myself.
What are we watching?
Yeah, the big boss is dialing the phone right now.
But
Remember
Eric,
when we were saying some of us work on this? Thomas.
Yeah.
And here's how Thomas got fired from NSF for the 500th time.
Yeah.
for the 500th time. It doesn't count till you get to 501.
Okay,
Eric,
that
thank you
works.
for the question there. We have so many people involved. There are people that are part-time. There are people that are full-time. It takes an awful lot of work. It takes a lot of hours to get the content coming your way, all of our commentary, all the stuff we do in Boca Chica, the daily videos, all the different things that you get from NASA's spaceflight across the board does take a lot of time. And we're able to do it because y'all keep showing up. So everybody across the board, thank you so much for all the super chats. The members, channel memberships are fantastic as well. You're letting the ads roll. You're showing up on the forums. You're in L2. You're liking things on Twitter. Whatever it is, y'all keep showing up, and that's what makes us able to keep bringing you this content and wacky commentary. Sometimes we have fun. We do have a lot of fun.
We do indeed, but I think with that, for today, the curtain will close for Thomas and I, but we are going to leave you in the wonderful hands of Das and Michael to wrap up here, or stay with you. Yeah, we are going to go ahead and pack it up so the very nice SpaceX security guard does not have to wait just for us.
All right. Well, I've switched over to my favorite view on launch day. Some people were already calling this out in chat, and you're right. On launch day at T plus whatever, I like to see a launch pad that does not have a rocket on it, because it meant that we got a launch today. And there you can see 39A. There is no Falcon 9. That's strong back there at a 45-degree angle, tilted away from where the rocket used to be. But rocket booster out there on the drone ship now, and second stage on its way to deliver those Starlink satellites and the Rideshares to orbit. Out in the field today, we had Chris Gebhardt and Thomas Berghart, both of them. Guys, thanks for joining us. As always, a pleasure.
As always, and thanks for the help back in the studio, and thanks for everyone for tuning in. Happy to.
All right, that was the voice of Thomas right there. And Chris, thank you as well. Oh, did he already disconnect? I called on him and he's gone.
Chris, you're muted.
Chris, we appreciate you as well. The other voice you heard out there with...
Chris also appreciates all of you.
Thanks for passing that on, Thomas.
Everyone. Thank you. My phone died.
Wow. But out there in the field, thank you so much. Also, be on the lookout on Twitter. Follow the official account at NASASpaceflight, because we have various photographers in the area, probably some streak shots and some shots of the launch and stuff like that. I don't know if Stephen and Julia were out there today getting some...
Stephen was out here for us
there
today, so
all right, good deal. Stephen Marr out there as well. So all those will clear through the primary Twitter account at NASASpaceflight. And back in the studio, we had Michael Baylor. Michael, as always, a pleasure.
No problem, and it seems like SpaceX is finally getting into a groove with these Starlink missions without any scrubs. You've seen a pretty good launch cadence so far this month without a single scrub.
Yep, absolutely. And Thomas and Chris, you're clear to shut that camera down. We'll go to Fleet Cam for the rest of the outro here. We are aware of the launch that's potentially has been scrubbed or not out of Wallops. We're not planning on streaming that launch. We did not roll a camera out to Wallops to try and catch that Black Brant sounding rocket launch. So that one, I believe Wallops is streaming if you're interested in...
It's streamed on a potato.
It's streamed on a potato.
If you've tuned in, you know what I mean.
It's just, I think that it's like literally a security camera or something that they pull a low bandwidth feed off of, if I've seen it. I know a lot of the feeds we get out of Wallops are actual security cameras mounted on towers, but they're coming in like it's substream quality a lot of the time. So that may be what's going on. But I do believe they're going to stream it. If you want to see a rocket that goes soof off the pad ridiculously quickly, that might be a stream that you want to catch. And then for us, we're going to be watching what's going on in Boca Chica all week. If there is something interesting going on, and we don't even know what that might be, maybe SN16 will roll out. Maybe something will happen with SN15. who knows? We know that we saw some booster segments end up in the high bay early this morning or late last night, depending on how you count it. But whatever's happening in Boca Chica, we'll have that here on the channel as well. Both the daily videos that Mary makes, those daily Boca Chica updates, the new Starbase sign is probably going to feature prominently in today's video. They were deploying a big tourist-style sign that said Starbase on it really large. So that'll be in the daily video, and every day we have updates as what's happening out there in Boca Chica. So if you haven't yet, go ahead.
Yeah, say what you're going to say, but I was going to say also, our next live stream will be Monday at around 1 p.m. Eastern Time. ULA is launching an Atlas V with the Cybers Geo Flight 5.
There you go. So be on the lookout there as well for a live stream on Monday. We saw them, I think they were like rolling that out, and that's around their pad out there at 41, right?
Correct.
So just a couple. Hey, Vinny Goldslinger actually says, shout out to Michael for all you do and everyone else. And then Laurie Jones-Wilson, membership or an upgrade, one or the other there. But across the board, folks, thank you so much. Thank you so much for all of the support. We're leaving you here with a shot of the drone ship. That is one of the drone ships that's at Port Canaveral on the Fleet Cam. You can watch Fleet Cam anytime. All the SpaceX operations there at the port. Sometimes they're doing things on the drone ships. They have the big fairing recovery ship that sometimes comes in and unloads fairings, the Sheila Bordelon in there as well. A lot of interesting stuff happened, and that's a 24/7 stream where you can just hang out with other like-minded space fans. If you want, maybe one of the mods can put that link into chat for now. But we are going to go ahead and end today's live coverage of that Falcon 9 launch. Still waiting for spacecraft separation, but everything looking good so far. We appreciate everybody hanging out from NASA's Spaceflight Livestream Control. I'm John Galloway, and we will see you nerds later. Thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Pressure looks good. Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantic. Water towers, fly! Flight downside, SPE off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.